Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi, how are you doing today? I hope you're in good health, safe. Yeah, the question has come up a few times. I've been getting this light right. There we go. Yeah, the election and the politic and what's going to happen now. And, it's an interesting question, not least of which because it's really something we should be asking ourselves all the time. And when we're not asking it, we're really allowing, whether it's politics or whatever it is that you're concerned at the moment, it's going on without your intervention. So what I will say, we live in a time of great, what did Shakyamuni call it? Yes, greed, anger, foolishness, or stupidity. But we live in a time of great distraction, instability, manipulation. Yeah, that's part of the world of anger. What do I want to say? Something, we talk about this all the time in Lotus Sutra Buddhism, in Buddhism entirely. Certainly Nichiren has brought it up several times. That the illusion of a self and environment as separate things is just that. It's an illusion. So ask yourself this. If you're perceiving the world around you as, disheveled or counterintuitive or frightening, or potentially disastrous in myriad ways, I want you to take a moment and reflect on your own life and see where those pockets of activity, whether in thought, word, or actions, physical actions, are doing the same thing in your own life. And for some of us, that may be really old stuff that you sort of put into a back corner collecting dust, thinking, maybe someday I'll deal with that, or maybe it'll just go away on its own. And you may find, poof, there it is right in your face. That's our environment as well. See, we think as Buddhists that we understand self and environment, but till it really blows up in your face, you really don't contend with it, right? So, I'm not trying to tell you what to do other than chant. It's the only thing you can do is align the forces of the universe, and those align in your mind, in your experience of the world. Yes. You want to change the world? The world that you know is the world in your mind. So yes, you can change the world because you own it, because it's your world. All 3,000 realms and every single thought moment, they're all yours. So yes, you can change. Well, how is that going to stop war across the world? If you do it, and you help your friends aspire to do the same thing, the more and more of us are doing that, the less likely those wars can continue. Obviously, enough of us aren't doing that yet. Or not enough. I'm not chastising you. It's not easy to do this. but you must do it. And if you're going to do this, do it daily. Yeah? All righty. Tripitaka. What an interesting next. Have I not gone over that yet? I must have talked about that before. No? We talked about trichiliocosm last time. Trichiliocosm. I'll never say that word right. All right, Tripitaka. This is a big one. There's 3 sections of it, so let's get started. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here. Again, I know this is a challenging practice. You might say, how effective could it be if it weren't challenging? Certainly at times, yes. Beware when it seems easy. All right, so I quote some different sources here. Let's get into it from Learn Religions. In Buddhism, the word Tripitaka is Sanskrit for the 3 baskets. You probably already knew that from Pali. And is the earliest collection of Buddhist scriptures. It contains the text with the strongest claim to being the words of the historical Buddha. That's rhetoric. Certainly, the early sects, about 20 or so of them, were all feverish around the earliest teachings or transcriptions of the teachings of Shakyamuni's lectures. Yeah. And of course, they were all translated in Pali. There were other translations going on at the same time in Sanskrit and in Gandhari and in other languages prior to moving into China. But for some reason, those sects that were based on the Pali canon, and some of them became very nihilist. Some of them, they went all sorts of different directions. It's by no means a cohesive bunch. But to this day, there are people that will tell you, and many historians consider them to be the, what do they call? Mainstream Buddhists. The way we label things is just fascinates me and disgusts me at the same time. Mainstream. They're just the most ardent in their opinion. And they're the ones who are going to tell you and I, oh, you Nietzschean people, you're all the same. They're right? It's like politicians. They always accuse the other side of being the other side, or their opponents, or their whatevers, of doing the very things that they do themselves. It's mirroring of a strange sort. Humans are weird. And you can quote me on that. Anyway, the text of the Tripitaka are organized into 3 major sections. The Vinaya Pitaka, containing the rules of communal life, in other words, the monastic life, which is no longer applicable to practitioners of Buddha, not to you and I. There's no way that going into a monastery and isolating ourselves is going to help the world at large, right? We are our environment. So putting you in a monastery is separating you from your environment. How can that be the full exercise of Buddhism? It's just wrong. So first thing, yeah? If you're into monastic rules, then you don't understand Buddhism, certainly not for this age. There was a purpose for it back then. And I've talked about that ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go over it again. The Sutra Pitaka, a collection of sermons or lectures of the Buddha and senior disciples, and the Abhidharma Pitaka, which contains the interpretations and analyses of Buddhist concepts. In Pali, these are the Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutta Pitaka, and the Abhidharma, right? So anytime you read Abhidharma or Abhidharma Dhatu in these translations, and we're going to run into it when we get into the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, of which there are different incarnations of. And I'm debating, I'm taking on the big volume. It goes all over the place because Shakyamuni's addressing, we'll get into that. But there's also a much older one that's associated with earlier teachings talking about the parinirvana of Shakyamuni-buddha. And it's much shorter, much shorter. It covers some of the same exact themes and wordage. So the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, or the Nirvana Sutra, I know in a lot of Nichiren schools there's talk of an early nirvana, and then there's the Mahaparinirvana as and their timing, their sequence, and when they were written, obviously different. But there may be some value in covering both when we start when I start the lecture series. Yeah. At any rate, when you read Abhidharma, my point being is that's early teachings, right? Don't try to shoehorn Abhidharma thinking into your Lotus Sutra practice because it really doesn't belong there. There's a lot to learn from these early scriptures. They weren't lies. They were just early attempts by Shakyamuni-buddha to reach the minds of the people of his day. The origins of the Tripitaka. Buddhist chronicles say that after the death of Shakyamuni-buddha in the 4th century before Christ, his senior disciples first met at the First Buddhist Council to discuss the future of the Sangha and the community of monks and nuns, and the Dharma, in this case, the Buddha's teachings. A monk named Upali recited the Buddha's rules for monks and nuns from memory, and the Buddha's cousin and attendant, Ananda, recited the Buddha's lectures. The assembly accepted these recitations as the accurate teachings of the Buddha, and they became known as the Sutra Pitaka and the Vinaya. Now, that's a very simple view of the early history of how Shakyamuni's lectures began to be transcribed, because they were all oral teachings, yes? There's a lot that's been written on the history, the folklore, the possibilities, the open-ended, don't really know, but, right? And there's several assemblies over time. Recently, in recent years, and I say that it's been 20, 30 years, but that's very recent when you're dealing with 3,000-year-old teachings, yeah? The Gandhari, and I recommend reading just as a point of interest, not for Buddhist scholarship per se, but just as an adjunct to your studies. Where is that book? I usually have it. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Lots and lots of information here. Some early translations. Yeah, selected translations. This book, I strongly recommend this. And there's another book on the sutras, talks about how they crossed the Himalayas and so forth. There's some really interesting literature out there about the history of Buddhism without being sanctimonious or just archaeological and paleontological. Discovered the fascinating story of a long-hidden Buddhist culture at a historic crossroads, Gandhara. Great information. It will open your eyes to this idea of how Buddhism self-corrects and how it was preserved over time. And it's a very down-to-earth, there's nothing like other scriptures. I don't really like that word because it's so tied to religious beliefs and phantasm and miracles and magic and written and given, imbued by. That's all religious chatter and mysticism. It's snake oil, right? In Buddhism, you observe it, you experience it, you know it. It doesn't require magical thinking and voices from clouds or bushes, right? So in that regard, reading a book like the one I just showed you is just a scientific exploration into these relics and where they've been collected, and it's fascinating. It's like I remember when I was young, the books and articles that came out about Tutankhamun and the discovery of his tomb and what they discovered in there and the various cuneiform things they'd found and all of that. It's fascinating because it's real. Yeah, it's not made up. Anyway. All right. The Abhidharma is the third Pitaka, or basket, and is said to have been added during the third Buddhist council. So already there's been three. And that's around 250 BC. So this is like 300 years or so after Shakyamuni passed away. Although the Abhidharma is traditionally attributed to the historical Buddha, it probably was composed at least a century after his death by unknown authors. At least a century. Yeah. It's quite well known that Shakyamuni lived about somewhere between 500 and 600 BC. Maybe some estimates are a little closer to the time of, I don't know why Christ has to be our pendulum of a calendar, but they won that one. But in the early 400s, or late 400s, it's weird because it's backwards before Christ. So yeah, this was put together long afterward. But you can see that source material that I'm quoting is perverted by the idea that they're the only ones who know the real words. How would they know? Variations of the Tripitaka. Here's an interesting topic. At first, these texts were preserved by being memorized and chanted or sung. And as Buddhism spread through Asia, there came to be chanting lineages in several languages. However, we have only seen two reasonably complete versions of the Tripitaka today. What came to be called the Pali Canon is the Pali Tripitaka, preserved in the Pali language. This canon was committed to writing in the 1st century BCE in Sri Lanka. Today, the Pali Canon is the scriptural canon of Theravada Buddhism, right? Which is very strong in Vietnam and other countries as well. There were probably several Sanskrit chanting lineages, which survive today only in fragments. The Sanskrit Tripitaka we have today was pieced together mostly from early Chinese translations, and for this reason it is called the Chinese Tripitaka. Interesting. Scholars like Kumarajiva, whom you know, and other scholars of his day, took on the transcription task of finding words, even creating words in Chinese to hold the concepts of certain terms that were common in Prakrit or Sanskrit, right, or Pali. The Sanskrit Chinese version of the Sutra Pitaka also is called the Agama, or the Agama Sutras, yeah? You've heard the Agama Sutras, right? Those are also followed by schools to this day, right? Both the Pali and these Agama Sutras are subsumed in the heading that Nichiren would tell you are Hinayana, or the smaller vehicle, the early teachings, yeah? There are two Sanskrit versions of the Vinaya called the Mulasarvastika Sarvastivada Vinaya followed in Tibetan Buddhism, and the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya followed in other schools of Mahayana Buddhism. These were named after the early schools of Buddhism in which they were preserved. That's early, transitional into Mahayana, yeah? The Chinese Sanskrit version of the Abhidharma that we have today is called the Sarvastivada Abhidharma, after the Sarvastivada school of Buddhism that preserved it. For more about the scriptures or texts of Tibetan and Mahayana Buddhism, see the Chinese Mahayana canon and the Tibetan canon. So I have students that contact me, and early on it confused me that there was Tibetan Buddhism, and it wasn't until really just 40 years ago or something, maybe longer. I'm losing my sense of time. But it was recent history that the Tibetan Buddhists actually accepted the Lotus Sutra into their library, if you will, of Buddhist writings. They had some Mahayana, some early Mahayana, but they didn't have many of the more advanced teachings, right? That's not to say that just because they read the Lotus Sutra, they all know Nichiren, we're all buddies. They did, like many people that Nichiren writes about, contorted it to fit their magical, mystical, I hesitate to even call it Buddhist. It's Tibetan religion. Anyway, that's a whole other subject. Are these scriptures true to the original version? Isn't that always the question? The honest answer is, we don't know. Comparing the Pali and Chinese Tripitakas reveals many discrepancies. Some corresponding texts at least closely resemble each other, but some are considerably different. The Pali Canon contains a number of sutras found nowhere else. And we have no way of knowing how much the Pali Canon of today matches the version originally written more than 2,000 years ago, which has been lost to time. Buddhist scholars spend a good deal of time debating the origins of the various texts. It should be remembered that Buddhism is not a revealed religion, meaning its texts are not assumed to be the revealed wisdom of a god. Buddhists are not sworn to accept every word as literal truth. In fact, Shakyamuni taught against that. Instead, we rely on our own insight and the insight of our teachers or co-students to interpret these early texts to derive what? That's right, the meaning. From the Britannica Encyclopedia, language corrected by me, Nichiren, like the Lotus Sutra and Pure Land schools, the indigenous Japanese Nichiren school focuses on the lotus of the True Law Sutra and emphasizes fervent resolve and the repetition of a key phrase, the dharani. Unlike other schools that were named after a book or a doctrine, the Nichiren school is unique in that it is named after its founder, Nichiren. The son of a poor fisherman, Nichiren became a monk at an early age and studied at Mount Hiei, the center of the Tendai school. He was frustrated by the many paths of Buddhism promising salvation and left Mount Hiei to search for the true path. When he emerged from his independent studies, he taught that the Lotus Sutra, the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra, contains the final and supreme teaching of the Buddha Shakyamuni and offers the only true way to liberation. According to Nichiren, the three forms of the Buddha, the universal or law body, the Dharmakaya, the enjoyment body, the phenomenal, or the enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya, and the phenomenal body, the Nirmanakaya, are important aspects of the Buddha Shakyamuni and should be granted equal respect. following the teaching of Zi, the Chinese founder of Tendai in China. Tendai, that the Lotus Sutra is the essence of Buddhism. Nichiren held that this same Buddha nature was possessed by all people and could be realized only by proper embrace of the Lotus Sutra, the Myoho Renge Kyo. Furthermore, like the Pure Land Buddhists, Nichiren felt that this time, which was marked by political upheaval, sound familiar? And unrest, again, sound familiar? Was the period of a degeneration, which is the word I was looking for earlier, known in the Lotus Sutra as the time of the latter-day Dharma, or Mappo in Japanese, when the purity of Buddhist doctrines could be kept only by the Bodhisattvas. Nichiren identified himself as an incarnation, a personification of several of them, especially Vishittakaritra, or Japanese Jogyo, the Bodhisattva of supreme conduct. Nichiren believed that his distinctive Bodhisattva mission was to propagate the true teachings of the Lotus Sutra in Japan, where he believed the regeneration of the Buddhist Dharma would occur. How are we doing time-wise here? Where's the clock? Okay. I may have to do this in two parts. Let's just barrel on through, shall we? In attempting to guide Japan to the Buddhist Dharma as he interpreted it, Nichiren drew great criticism for his strong-willed and uncompromising attitude. In one treatise, Nichiren wrote that the unrest in Japan was caused by the chaotic state of religious beliefs, a condition that could be corrected only by adopting the teachings of the Lotus Sutra. He taught that if people turned to this sutra, they would realize their true Buddha nature, perceive that suffering is illusion, and see that this world is a paradise, the Buddha land. It's all right, the world, your mind. If human beings, i.e. the Japanese, did not follow the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, however, natural disasters and invasions would result. Wow. Moreover, Nichiren, confident of the righteousness of his cause, attacked the Shingon and Amida Buddhist groups for neglecting Shakyamuni, the true Buddha of the Lotus Sutra, and he attacked Zen for placing stress only on Shakyamuni's historical form. He went so far as to declare that the Nembutsu is hell, Zen is a devil, and the Shingon is the nation's ruin. These sharp criticisms led Nichiren to be exiled twice and almost brought his execution, from which he was, according to his own account, and the belief of his adherents, miraculously saved. Nichiren advocated two main religious practices, religious in that they're repeated, yes, not religious from the woo-woo camp. The first is the resolve to attainment of the Honzon, right? We know it as the Go-Honzon, the most prized Honzon. And a mandala, symbolic diagram, designed by Nichiren, a tool for or mirror of this Go-Honzon portal in the sentient mind, which represents both the Buddha nature that is in all of us and the three forms of Buddha Shakyamuni, right? The Dharma, the manifest, the reward. The second is the Daimoku, in Japanese sacred title. The repetition, both orally and in every action of the believer, of the practitioner, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, of the phrase Namu, as he indicated earlier, to completely inculcate, embrace this, Myoho Renge Kyo, or homage to the Lotus Sutra, to affirm belief in the teaching and the efficacy of the Lotus Sutra, the Myoho Renge Kyo. Nichiren also taught that there should be a sacred place of ordination, a kaidan, where the practitioner could receive training in the doctrines of the Lotus Sutra. This sacred place might be seen as wherever the believer in the Lotus Sutra lives, for there is the Buddha's truth, right? The Honzon, Daimoku, and Kaidan, the three great secret laws, or refuge, are regarded as the essential teaching of Nichiren. Maybe you didn't know that. Nichiren's fervent resolve brought him wide fame and devotees, and at his death he chose 6 disciples to continue his work. That was at Mount Minobu, remember? They developed the Nichiren Shu, School of Nichiren, which still controls the main temple founded by Nichiren at Mount Minobu. One of his disciples, Nikko, established the Nichiren Shoshu, Japanese true school of Nichiren, which taught that Nichiren, not Shakyamuni, was the original Buddha. That derision, that's the Fuji district. A vile corruption of ego and counter to all Nichiren's writings. And the mandala painted by Nichiren was alone efficacious in liberating mankind. In the 20th century, these schools gained many devotees. I have a whole set of videos on the 6 disciples, how they went their different ways, what schools, what the history of them is, so on and so forth. Within the Nichiren Shu, the Ryukai, Association of the Friend of the Spirit, arose in 1925, pretty recent. This group, which preaches a combination of ancestor worship and Nichiren's doctrines, places resolve not in the Buddha or the Bodhisattvas, but in the mandala, which is, see, that's materialistic. They missed the mark. They don't understand that the mandala is the perfect mirror for us to see our own Gohonzon mind, portal. But they've misread things, and they believe that this mandala is somehow has special power. See the magic in that? There's no magic in Buddhism. Whenever you confront that in anything you read, it's wrong, okay? In which all saving power is concentrated. It's in your mind. Buddhism is about the mind. How many times must we say this and read this for these little offshoots to stick out? And why do people like to be mystified? What is that? We know that a magician produces sleight of hand, right? Prestidigitation. He fools you into looking one way so that you can be surprised at the results in another. But we know that that magic is just a deception, right? But people just love to be deceived. What is that? That's karma. That's terrible. We need to be wise to that as Buddhists. The Risho Kosekai, Society for Establishing Righteousness and Friendly Relations, which I've read their translations and many more things from them. They have a large publishing arm, of the Lotus Sutra and other sutras, which split from the Ryukai in 1938, teaches the recitation of the Daimoku as an affirmation of resolve in the teachings of the Lotus Sutra and the homage of the Buddha Shakyamuni. Much more true to the teachings. The Ryukai is also allows the veneration of ancestral spirits. The Risho Kosekai gained many converts after World War II, but its success was soon eclipsed by, you know who, the Soka Gakkai. The lay movement of the Nichiren Shoshu sect, founded by Makiguchi Tsunesaburo in 1871 to 1944. In 1930, Soka Gakkai was dedicated to educational research and extension of Nichiren Shoshu. Its founder insisted on the practical values of worldly gain, a corruption due to the extensive losses of the Japanese citizens after the destruction of World War II, and the belief that a return of worldly belongings would restore the integrity of the populace. Now you see where Soka Gakkai, SGI, gets its materialistic chant for a new car, chant for a job, chant for breast explants, chant. It's nuts. Buddhism is anything but materialistic. Everything Buddhism teaching, everything Shakyamuni taught, Nichiren taught, Tendai taught. Liberation from what, you ask? Liberation from that material stuff, that attachment. They were teaching the exact opposite of Buddhism. Oh, how frustrating. And happiness as well as the attainment of goodness, beauty, and world peace. Lofty goals while you get your new car. He taught that Nichiren was to be worshipped, a religious corruption, as the true Buddha. Nichiren never claimed that. Right? We are all true Buddha. Nichiren was the leader of the bodhisattvas of the earth, which we are all endeavoring to embody. Bodhisattva practice, yes? Awaken the Buddha mind via the Hanzon, the portal, using Nichiren's wonderful mandala to mirror that potential that we all have, yes? Predicted in the Lotus Sutra. This is the central corruption of the sect that misinterprets for their own political gains the stories of Maitreya to manifest as a human like Shakyamuni in the 10,000 years after the end of Mappo. The members also fervently practice Daimoku and worship the Hanzon. Shouldn't be worshiping the Hanzon. We don't worship anything in Buddhism. We manifest. Why do we use the mandala? To open our ninth consciousness, the Buddha, the Amala consciousness, Buddha, in our sentient mind. That's where Buddha lies, yes? We're all trying to awaken that Buddha consciousness. We don't worship, we manifest it in the form of the mandala rather than the intended awakening of the mind. As a repository of the power of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, after World War II, Soka Gakkai, under the leadership of Toda Jose, grew rapidly through the technique of evangelism called shakabuku, in Japanese break and subdue, in which the resistance of the other person is destroyed by forceful argument. Although its practice of shakabuku was curtailed by Ikeda Daisaku, the society's third president, Soka Gakkai continued to grow throughout the second half of the 20th century and expanded into other countries, including the United States. Thus, Nichiren's teachings and personality are still strong influences today. But of course, all of this is being discussed under the rubric of Tripitaka, right? Next will be Triple World. So, you learned about Tripitaka, and you also learned about some of the... how could you talk about the way Buddhism trickled into translations in different languages without also obviating the translation, the misunderstandings, the contortions, yes? And certainly after world wars, a lot of reevaluation occurs in times like that. I'm reminded again of the era we live in. Are we bound to repeat that cycle of egregious death and illness and avarice and terrible behavior just so that we can reevaluate everything later? Are we really that? It is frightening. And so all of this is just another call to steady your practice. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, right? Stay strong in your practice. Understand that Buddha is something you experience in your mind. Nobody can hand it to you. Nobody can keep it from you. You manifest it, just like you manifest a fist or an open hand or a smile or assistance. That's Buddha. It's on us to manifest that just like anything else we manifest. We don't just crawl to the ground and worship and hope and please give me, give me, give me. That's not Buddhism. That's some inhuman stripping you of power and of dignity. It gives the dignity of the very energy that your life is constructed of over to somebody else. The whim of whoever enters the room and tells you what to do. Are you really that weak that you need others to tell you what to do? Sometimes we need direction, somebody to give us a hint. But you're the one who takes the hint and does something with it. You're the one who goes, I get it now. And your insight drives you forward. Yeah, that's how we work. So keep it that way. Keep focusing that way. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Manifest Buddha. Let my mind be awash with enlightenment, clarity. I need to know. Make me know. Make me. You're talking to yourself. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. With these incredible insights, I will move forward in the maximal way that my freight train of karma can manifest. All right. I hope that was helpful. I'll be back with another soon. I'm awaiting my printed first drafts to come back from the printer, and then we'll get started on a series of videos. Until that time, please take care of your health, keep your practice strong, and I will see you real soon. Okay? Bye for now.